Welcome to the City Council Oversight Committee meeting for Thursday, January 8th. I have a hard stop at 5:15, and I would like to remind everybody, do not speak unless you're recognized, and we're going to keep it a tight schedule. First on the agenda is discussion regarding amendments to the AIM Norman Agricultural, Residential, and Urban Reserve language. And
Laura Hoggett with the Planning Department. We're gonna do items 1 and 2 together, if that's okay.
yes.
Do you need to read it, or is
Sure. And then we'll discuss regarding updating the AIM Norman map to include the new turnpike alignment as announced by the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority.
All right. So we were approached by council to look at some amendments to the AIM language in the urban reserve category. Since AIM's adoption, the 30-acre requirement has kind of been a contentious topic. So after adoption, I think a lot of people started to realize, oh, we've had this land for a long time. We thought we could subdivide it into 10 acres for our kids or what have you, and now they cannot. So we prepared some suggested changes, and we'll just see what you guys think and go from there. So in other areas of the document, I'll back up a little bit. So in the agricultural residential land use category, there's a minimum lot size of 10 acres, and there is an allowance to go down to 2 acres if you do a planned unit development where 65% of the total area is reserved as open space. And that's termed as cluster development in some other areas, so we wanted to just have some continuity in the document. And just to clarify, that's if you had, just to make it easy math, if you had 100 acres, 65% of that would have to stay as open space, so 65 acres. The rest could be developed down to 2-acre lots. And then in site design, we thought it would be a little clearer to say when utilizing cluster development, drainage ways should be properly buffered. And there is a key at the bottom, I should have mentioned that first. But new text is red and underlined, and then deleted text would be the light gray color. So in urban reserve, this, we were kind of trying to make sure that the setup of each section within urban reserve was the same as other sections. So we kind of took some language from agricultural residential and moved them over to urban reserve because they are very similar, but urban reserve has some kind of extra qualifiers to develop. So we just wanted to have the same language in both when talking about minimum lot size of 10 acres and the cluster development. In building types, all it said was large lot, single unit homes. So we added with the allowance for ADUs because they can do that now. And then some of the language from AR that says you can have barns, stables, and kind of like agricultural uses as well. So we would be taking out the minimum lot size of 30 acres section, and that would be replaced with what we went over before with the 10 acres. And every other section has the minimum lot size in the description and context. So we're just trying to keep them similar. Site design, 10-acre subdivisions are appropriate. And then to keep the terminology the same, cluster development should avoid large parcels without access to existing streets and these things. We wanted to have the same drainage way buffering language as the other sections.
I have a quick question about
Yes.
that. So we're not talking like septics for cluster developments. They have to be on water and sewer to be developed.
So in the 2045 character area, I'm glad you brought that up. In the policies of the 2045 reserve area, you must be contiguous with existing development and you have to extend services to your property.
Okay.
So that's in the character area, and the steering committee wanted to do it that way. So it can't be changed because you can't request to be removed from a character area.
Okay. So, thank you.
So those are our language changes. I didn't put every section on the slides because that would be a lot. But those are the suggested changes. But it's up to you guys if you want to move forward with it or change anything or not do 10 acres, really, whatever. You guys.
Councilmember Nofar?
So just full disclosure, I was the one that asked for this. I immediately, as soon as I took the seat, I was approached by multiple individuals who essentially gave me the same scenario that she brought up, stating that they had, so many acres, 30, 40, 50 acres, whatever, and they couldn't subdivide it anymore down to 10 acres to give to their children. And that was the spark behind this 10-acre rule change.
Were you able to work with the planning department on what they're presenting today?
Yes, ma'am. I have met with them a few times over the last couple of months to make sure that the language was, they had the language part, but the idea was correct on what we were aiming for.
And then for your concerned constituents, have you communicated these changes and gotten any feedback?
Not yet. This is exactly what they were asking for, though, back to the original 10-acre rule. And so as long as they could, one was specifically, they had 30 acres and they wanted to divide it out between their two sons. And so this would meet that. And after today, my goal was to call both of them.
Appreciate that. All right.
Okay. And then the second item was to update all of the maps and the AIM master plans with the current alignment from OTA. So they released a new proposed alignment. I'm not sure if it's final or not, but in September. So we didn't do every single map because that would be a lot of maps in case we don't change it. But this is an example of what a map would look like. So this is our land use map.
Is that in the packet?
It was not in the packet. We just got it today. But it will be pushed out now.
And my other question, so with the alignment as the term OTA is going to place it, does that change anything that AIM had considered when, so it's all the same densities and?
Yeah, nothing else would change on the land use map except the proposed alignment.
Councilmember Nofar?
I was just wondering if they had contacted the city or something else, because I've checked their websites and went back over their most recent meeting, which was, I want to say Tuesday, and they have not officially decided or started declaring taking lands or anything of that sort. And so the exact alignment is still unknown. They have a proposed, and that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, so we, sorry, I should have mentioned there's a note under the maps in the plans that says we will show the most up-to-date information we have from OTA. So GIS grabbed what they had on their website as of today.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Moving on. Okay.
Oh, Beth would like to.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Hello, council member. I apologize for coming in late, and because I did, I just wanted to make sure that this was said if it had been mentioned. It's in your staff reports, but when we're talking about altering the 30-acre language back to 10, you'll probably remember when we brought the plan for approval, there were ordinances with it. And so section 30, one section in chapter 30 of our code was changed to implement that 30-acre rule. It's just a little parenthetical that references 30 acres for the urban reserve land use. What we would do in order to make that consistent with these is bring that back in an ordinance, because that would have to be an ordinance, while the rest of it would be resolution. And we would just strike that parenthetical.
Okay. So
Pretty short.
yeah. So does that kind of cover the both agenda items? Okay. Are there any other questions about these two? Okay. Well, I guess. So when will we see this on an agenda for a voting meeting?
Well, I guess I would ask first, do we want to bring this to full council before we,
Like a study session,
Please.
council conference?
please?
Yeah, I think that would be good. Especially since the mayor isn't in here with us.
Right.
Okay.
So I can get with the city clerk and figure out when we can get it on an agenda, but I just think it would be better if we did that before we took it to planning commission, and we would have to advertise and,
So we might see a study session / council conference this month and
probably the end of this month. I'll see if we can get on the end of this month. I don't know what their agenda is at this point.
all right, thank you.
Sorry.
Item number 3 is a discussion of possible ways to encourage public feedback earlier in the process when creating tax increment finance districts. Is it,
I think it's Catherine, we're gonna,
grab her real quick?
yes. I'm sorry, we have planning commission at 5:30, so
That's fine.
we're gonna still.
Yeah, I have a hard stop at 5.
Okay, thanks. Catherine's on her way.
Let's kick over real quick. And that's the 30-acre
What was that?
discussion.
Which one?
We already did 1 and 2.
Okay. I saw Jane and them leaving. I was like, you guys already.
Sorry.
Through meetings this week.
My back turned to the back again. Realize it's past 4. I was
We
gonna say,
move
we're going
fast.
on a good clip.
Saw a text her. It was like, tell Brenda I said hi. I was like, oh yeah, I gotta go to Oversight early so I can.
Okay,
No, where's that?
Thank you, sir.
Some fun reading material. I'd like to give you something else to read because you don't have enough. I don't know if you've done any introduction on this item, but
no, we just
Okay.
read off the agenda item.
okay. So Councilmember Grant and I had talked about this in December, I think, about the discussion in the community about tax increment financing districts and how they get adopted and how, you know, sometimes when you get to the end of the process, then you're having your public hearings and all those things, and it's harder to influence the outcome and the product. So how could we talk about involving the public a little more earlier in the process? So I wanted to talk, because we do have several new members, talk just briefly. I have a lot of slides, but I'll go through them fast, about TIFs and how they work and why we can do them. It comes from a constitutional provision which authorized the legislature to adopt laws allowing municipalities to provide incentives, exemptions, or other relief from taxation, but only in certain areas. And then the Local Development Act was adopted in 1992, allowing municipalities to implement this constitutional provision through creation of tax increment finance districts in areas that are unproductive, undeveloped, underdeveloped, or blighted. This is the purpose of TIF districts from the Local Development Act. It's a tool to be used in areas where investment, development, and economic growth are difficult, but could be possible with TIF assistance. They're used to generate new employment opportunities, attract investment to areas of need throughout the city. Those 3 terms there, reinvestment areas, historic preservation areas, and enterprise areas, are actually areas that qualify by virtue of that designation for a TIF. And then to generate new residential and commercial investment that enhances the quality of life, education, and economic stability. So a TIF is not a new tax. It's essentially taking the growth in taxes in an area and allocating that to particular project costs. That increment can include ad valorem and or sales tax, and it could include 100%, 50%, 25%, whatever is determined. So oftentimes you'll see where a TIF maintains the current funding, so whatever property tax or sales tax is generated already continues to go to the taxing jurisdictions. And then that growth might be split where the city retains 50% of the property taxes, which we don't normally retain any part of, to fund project costs, while the 50% of the growth goes to the taxing jurisdictions. And those percentages vary based on the project and the needs for funding. So this is kind of how that works. You have over the life of a TIF district, which can be up to 25 years, your base assessed value, which is that's what it was generating when the TIF is created. The increment is whatever the growth is in that revenue, and that is what's allocated towards project costs. And at the end of the 25 years, all of those revenues then go back to the normal taxing jurisdictions. As I said, TIFs can be used in these three areas. Those are designated typically by the state, enterprise areas and historic preservation areas. Reinvestment areas are areas requiring public improvements, and there's some specific criteria there for that. You go through a process to designate a TIF district, and this is all set by the Local Development Act. So as we talk through ways to increase public input, it's not replacing any of this, but it would be supplementing this and adding things to this process. Typically, we will come to council and ask for direction when a proposal is made for a TIF to go ahead and move forward with the project plan, and we will bring that back to a statutory review committee. Local Development Act, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, sets out who's on that committee and what their role is, goes to Planning Commission, and then you have 2 public hearings and a council vote. The project plan has to contain, where the project area is. That's the areas where you can spend money to do projects, and then where the increment is generated from, the increment district. You have to describe generally the public improvements, private investment, and estimated public revenues to accrue, and put in a list of project costs, how to be financed, those kind of things. Any changes in zoning and the master plan have to be set out in that plan, and then you have typically the city manager as the person in charge of implementation and the authorization of a public entity to carry out the project plan. And the TIFs in Norman, we have the Norman Tax Increment Finance Authority, our public trust for TIFs, and that's who's typically serving as the public entity to carry out the project plan for us. The Statutory Review Committee has to meet and make a recommendation to council on the project plan. And this occurs prior to public hearings and adoption by council and by the Planning Commission. So membership is set by statute. These are not necessarily going to be people who are directly impacted by the type of development or anything like that. It's more representatives of the taxing jurisdictions who are going to have their growth in taxes allocated toward these project costs. So you have a representative of the city who serves as the chairperson, and our practice has been for the mayor to serve in that role. Someone designated by Planning Commission, and then our taxing jurisdictions, Cleveland County, the Health Department, the library, Norman Public Schools, and More Norman. When they have their first meeting, they then appoint from a list of 7 people provided by the chairperson, 3 at-large members. If it's the retail-based TIF, there's got to be someone in that at-large position, in one of those at-large positions, who has some retail background or connection. And so that committee looks at the project plan, they look at the economic analysis, and then they make a recommendation to council. And all of that then is taken forward for the public hearings and Planning Commission. Here's what they have to find specifically. The district is eligible for a TIF. The plan and project will have a financial impact. What does that look like? And they have to include analysis that's used to project revenues over the life of the project plan and the effect on the taxing entities. They can recommend it be approved, denied, approved subject to conditions, and then that goes forward to council. And if council makes any substantial changes in what they propose, it has to go back to the review committee again.
What's that document called? I haven't seen that for
Which document?
the document that they put together.
For their findings?
Yeah, this is the document, this is the position.
Yeah,
Councilmember Bruce, I'd like to remind you that we're being recognized. Councilmember Bruce.
Sorry, I jumped ahead too. So typically that comes to council in the form of a resolution where they make their recommendation. If they want to set out conditions, they would put that in the resolution as well. And then the analysis would be included with that, or they could be relying on analysis that's included with the project plan. We do typically do some analysis that's part of the project plan as well. When it gets to planning commission, this often involves changes to zoning or the land use plan, and so planning commission reviews the project plan in light of those things and makes a recommendation to council as well. And that's an opportunity for public comment. And that's really the first opportunity. I don't think we've had a statutory review committee that's provided for public comment. So this is really the first opportunity for the public to comment on the plan, at least in a formal meeting. Then you have 2 public hearings. The first is just to provide the information and answer questions. And then the second is for people to come and tell you what they think about it. They have very specific notice requirements to make sure that property owners within a radius of the district have notice, but also the general public has notice. And so we go through that process, and then it gets to council. And so council gets all of the minutes of the statutory review committee, the planning commission, you would sit through the public hearing, so you would have that information, and then you'll have an ordinance, just like any other ordinance, first and second reading, with second reading being the opportunity for the public to comment. So they really get two opportunities, both the planning commission and council, to comment. But the criticism we hear is that, as I said before, you don't often have an opportunity for public input earlier in the process. When we think about potential upcoming TIFs that you guys are looking at, Griffin, downtown, adjacent neighborhoods to Griffin, or in the case of downtown, the businesses that are involved there may have more direct impacts based on whatever's proposed in the project. And so that might be an opportunity where you want to bring some citizens in that are impacted and get some impact or get some input earlier in the process. UMP TIF, the original in 2006, did this. There was a 17-member citizen TIF committee. I went back and pulled the roster of the committee. Our files don't go back quite that far to get their minutes, but we had those at one time. I've listened to tapes at these meetings as well. We had a sitting council member on the committee, a former council member, and a former mayor. We had 3 local business representatives, 3 attorneys. We had a City of Norman employee from the police department, which was interesting. An OU representative, someone from the OU School of Architecture, and then we had 3 or 4 other citizens that served on the committee. And so there was broad input. This isn't one because it was vacant land where it was impacting people living there currently or doing business there currently, but it did get broad input, and they actually, interestingly, grew the size of that original request for that TIF and decided to bring in the retail component and the conference center. So initially the request was just for more public infrastructure, public improvements, and this committee actually dreamed a little bigger than OU had and wanted to bring in these other components, which was probably not how anyone thought that would go. They were not unanimous in their decision. I do recall a minority report that was filed, so they weren't able to come to a unanimous decision on what to recommend, but they at least had that committee to look at it and kind of get some input from different members of the community. The other thing we hear is we don't have really, beyond the Local Development Act, our own procedure or requirements for how we accept these proposals, how they get submitted, what information is required, how they're evaluated. And so I know our focus today is really more on the public input piece, but I wanted to throw that out there because some of the things I've given you talk about process, and a lot of cities require an application that sets out the benefit of the project, the but-for requirements. We need this assistance because we can't do the project without it, that kind of thing. And so that might be something that council wants to consider, so you have the same information every time you're looking at a proposal by which to evaluate it. And I think ultimately, if council wants to move forward with something, This is a process, both the public input piece and just the overall procedure, that could be codified in our ordinances or adopted by resolution as a policy of the council, so that would be sort of more set out there in stone in terms of how we handle these proposals when they come forward. We have several right now, as I said, we're talking about, and those are really city initiated. So probably not a application to ourselves in that case, but it would give us, guidelines for information that we need to make sure we have for you all as you continue to discuss those.
And I was going to say, was it Texas, or I'm sorry, Fort Worth, that had like the dollar amount that applicants had to pay?
Yes, there's an application fee in Fort Worth, I believe. And that's really to cover the cost of the city's review. It's not, like most of our fees, it's not,
It's on page 7.
gonna cover every single thing, but we want to be able to have those funds to do our own review. It may be that the council wants an independent economic analysis done, and so
That would be covered with
that would help fund some of that.
How much does a analysis cost?
Depends on the size of the project.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance. I wanted to look back and see we did an independent analysis for the arena proposal. It was under 25,000, I'm sure, but that was a really large project. Some of these smaller projects might not cost as much. And it might be something where you set up the overall project plan, but when someone comes forward to request development assistance, maybe that's when you look at what they're going to generate and do an economic analysis then, because the increment that they're going to generate is often tied to what they might receive in development assistance.
And currently we don't have an application fee or anything like that.
No, and we've only had 2 really, I think, that have been adopted by council that came forward from outside parties. Campus Corner back in 2001 or 2, I think, was really a joint effort of the city and the Campus Corner Merchants Association. Center City was a city-led effort, but University North Park, the original in 2006, and then the arena in 2024, right? Those were both proposed by the university. So we didn't have an application for those. Both of those came forward to council and were handled by council and through the statutory process.
And it's been a minute since December. Did Fort Worth have a citizen process?
I don't think so. They had a review process for staff. They had some language in here about tying into some of their other economic development goals for small businesses, affordable housing, things like that. But certainly, I think in our procedure, we could fit that in early in the process. After the proposal's received, vetted by staff, we've got the economic analysis. You could appoint a citizen committee to look at it before the project plan is drafted. Or some cities have committees that look at specific projects within a TIF district. And so it wouldn't be the overall TIF, but when someone comes forward and says, I need assistance to complete this project, then that committee meets and reviews it.
And then I was going to say also page 7 project criteria, A, use of TIF proceeds. I like this sentence because I think it would address some of the criticisms I've heard, and it's TIF district proceeds cannot be used to support exclusively private purposes. And is that something that, whether it was written or not now, like our TIFs are pretty much public-private, like they're not exclusively private.
Right. I mean, typically they do have some public component. The private component is called assistance in development financing, and there's not a restriction on how much of the authorized project costs could be dedicated to that. So it's possible it could be more private than public under the statute, but certainly that's something that council could discuss. I would just recommend that we can't predict every project that might come forward, and so you want to leave yourself some flexibility if something really great comes through that's got community support and council support. We don't want to have to just amend the process to accommodate it. We want to leave some flexibility for those kind of projects to be considered.
I also think the small business firm commitment toward the project was interesting in the Texas language.
Someone's nap time is happening out there.
And then I also like the affordable housing requirements. That's on page 9. It says, as authorized by and in accordance with section 311 Texas Tax Code, the City Council hereby delegates the authority to set an affordable housing policy by resolution of the respective district board for those districts with project and financing plans that allow TIF funding in support of affordable housing. I would love to see something like that for Norman.
Yeah, and when you think about Griffin, that might be an opportunity for some affordable housing or workforce housing where you would want to tie a policy to that to make sure that when projects come forward, there's some set aside for that kind of housing. That's another thing I wanted to point out. Some cities, and we've done this with Center City, adopt a policy guide specifically for each TIF. We haven't done it for each TIF, we've done it for Center City because it was anticipating more assistance in development financing. And so we have a policy guide that helps us know how to implement that for that particular TIF. But we haven't had those on others, and that's something that could also be done to just.
Or consistent policy guides for each TIF district.
Right, because each one will have different goals, so it makes sense to do something specific for each district, and so that might be something to consider also.
And I like that too because that lets people who are interested in developing in the district know that what they can do versus what they think they can do.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bruce.
Thank you. Going back on proposals, the typically, what's the ratio as far as who's proposing a TIF? You know, is it like 60% private party coming to a city saying, hey, I got this great deal for you? 40%, really it'd be a city driving it?
Yeah, it really depends. For Norman, we've had 2 that were proposed by OU and then 2 that were initiated by the city. For Oklahoma City, they set up TIFs proactively, not in response to a proposal typically, but they allow for proposals to come forward for assistance in development financing once the TIF is adopted. And they do quite a few where there's that private developer coming in and requesting assistance. We have been more public infrastructure based in most of ours, but certainly.
I heard that Oklahoma City does that. They use TIFs all the time, various sizes for their projects.
They do.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot.
They have quite a few. I looked at the count today. I can't think of what it is. Tulsa has quite a few as well. And the way they do it is strategic. When they were trying to turn Oklahoma City around, I can't remember when you moved to Oklahoma, but you might have been here at the beginning of the turnaround for downtown Oklahoma City. They were really strategic about where they adopted them. They had one really large project area over downtown, and then they adopted separate increment districts depending, on different projects. So Devon Tower was part of an increment district, and that funds certain things. So they've been pretty strategic about it, but they typically do pay-as-you-go TIFs, so they don't issue debt most of the time. Usually they're looking at the increment that your project is generating, and that will be returned to you as it's generated, which is a good protection for the city. But they have used it quite a bit.
I was also going to ask about the Kansas Kansas resolution in section 4 procedure. I thought it was interesting. I don't know if we have this, but upon review of the TIF application, the city may require and the applicant must furnish upon request further information in order to clarify the submittal. Does that mean we could ask for studies and impact analysis?
Yeah, we typically do that. And we rely on them to provide that. We haven't really had a situation where they've said, no, we're not going to do that, because there has to be some justification that shows what they're going to generate. But all of that's helpful so that from the beginning, everyone's on the same page of what might be required.
And then another thought with that is, you know, there could be a conflict and, you know, because they want to get their project approved. Is it standard practice for us to do like an independent analysis of their work to make sure that it actually checks out?
Yeah, so it depends on, in practice, it's dependent on the project. The
Like,
two
I
that we've
guess-
initiated, not so much because we felt good about what we had, the data we had. The original UNP, Dr. Alexander Holmes with OU did projections. I don't think he was necessarily working for the OU Foundation. I'm not sure who employed him to do that, but we did regularly compare revenue that was coming in to what his projections were. With the arena project, we had a report from the Department of Commerce, which NEDC paid for. We had a report from another company that the developer paid for. And then we looked at those and saw there might be a negative impact to some sales tax. There might be some issues with sales tax outside of the district. And so we contracted with a firm to just do that work for us to dig deeper into that. And so in that case, it was a small contract. We were able to get Daryl to sign it and move pretty quickly to get that analysis done. So council had the information.
Would it be advisable to, when we have projects that are brought to us from outside entities, to make that a part of the process just to double check their work?
Yeah, I think it's good to do our own economic analysis. We are typically going to have a different concern than a developer. They're concerned about, is this project going to generate enough money for the assistance I'm requesting? We're concerned about, is it going to generate enough to pay for the cost of the district, and how is it going to impact the city sales tax outside of the district? And so doing our own analysis allows us to sort of weigh in and make sure the inputs into that analysis cover what we need to know from it.
Is that something we can put in policy? I would like to do that for, I mean, like, we have a TIF district master plan where we envision areas, but I can still see somebody coming forward in the future and maybe they don't want to develop in those areas, to have something else. I think it would be a good idea to double check their work.
Yeah, and you can do that. You know, people can come in and they don't have to be part of a larger TIF district. They could ask for TIF just for their property. And so that's something where you're really going to want to be sure about the revenues, because you're going to be promising to give some of that increment back.
Councilmember Bruce?
I would imagine there's a best in class for municipalities, governments, for internal evaluation of TIF packages. I would imagine there is. And finding that entity that educates the municipality, okay, what's the framework?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, if you're into that, if you do a lot of these, like Oklahoma City, and say, hey, look, we got to invest in this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there are a lot of firms out there that do it, and that do it well. I wish I could remember the name of the firm we used
But I mean,
most recently, but
not hiring out, but have your own internal guy that really does that
internal.
assessment for
Yeah.
that. Or, okay, yeah, I might have hired it out, but I also want that internal assessment as a double check, to check the numbers and the assumptions behind those numbers.
yeah.
So, okay, I'm on solid ground about what I think may happen.
Yeah, that guy just retired. So we're gonna need someone. But that's a good point. It's to have someone internal too who can serve as a check. And we've definitely worked closely with finance through every single TIF that's been considered to look at the impacts independently, but then also to review whatever we're receiving from other parties.
If what I've been told about Oklahoma City is true, they have to have someone in-house do that internal analysis.
Yeah, I would think so. They have they have an attorney that only does TIFs, and she's probably not the only one, honestly. And then they have someone in finance, and that's their focus as well. So I'm sure they have someone who's dedicated just to doing those type of analyses.
I was gonna say, I noticed the Kansas TIF administration service fee is a 5% versus a flat rate in the Fort Worth. I'm curious about that, because when you have a very large TIF like the arena,
That would be,
but you would think about how much time is being spent from staff to administer that. Is 5% pretty?
depends on the size of the project. I
Okay.
think for the arena, that's probably too
Fair.
much.
Or
Maybe
too
too
much?
much, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
If you're doing 5% of 600 million.
What about a
You don't wanna
$44 million
make money.
TIF in Center City?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at it is time consuming to do these, but it's also part of our job. So we'd have to look at the time and see, how that,
If it's
Math
2% for Norman versus Old
yeah.
Kansas.
And I will say typically when we bring a project forward, we do have a line item to cover some of the costs that we incur in adopting the TIF. If it doesn't get adopted, we don't recover those costs, but we do have that line item in, I think all of our TIFs, the arena, the Center City, the original UNP as amended. And I don't know about the campus corner for sure, but I would be surprised if it didn't include that. So we do try to capture the costs we expend on outside counsel, outside economic analysis and things within the TIF, so that some of those project costs, some of those increments being generated come back and reimburse the city for those costs.
Yeah, section 5 and the fees, that's interesting as well, because it's like 5% or 5,000, whichever is less, due at time of submittal of the application. The other thing I liked with this Kansas one was reapplication fees for substantial changes will be charged at the same rate as the schedule shown above, which would probably cover the costs, associated with looking at something that could be, it doesn't say, but like, is it 50% is considered substantial or 30%?
Well, under our statute, it's 5%. Before a change to a project plan has to come back through the whole process with the statutory review committee and all that. So 5% in cost or 5% in area.
Okay.
So I don't know, I haven't read the Kansas Act that authorizes TIFs to know if that's tied to the act or if that's just something they've determined on their own for their fees. But
that's something we could do if we're wanting to make sure that for all the time we spend on this, we're getting our staff time covered.
Yeah.
All right.
So I gave you all this so that you could look at it, and I really think this is the start of probably a longer discussion, not just for public comment, but process. A couple of these things I gave you were from the Governmental Finance Officers Association, GFOA, and they have some good general information. They have to be careful because that goes out to all 50 states and the laws are different in every state, but they do have some good sort of best practice information, as did the Council of Development Finance Agency, so that's just something to look at. And then, of course, the couple policies, there's a lot out there, so we can definitely find.
For the recommended practices, is the packet you're talking about?
Yeah, the first 3 articles are really more along the line of best practices.
Yeah, I see building consensus. It says while redevelopment can be exciting, it also triggers an emotional response from the community, particularly for developments that create transformational changes, which I think our TIF district master plan kind of envisions that. Yeah, okay. Well, I agree. I do think it is the start of a longer discussion, and I appreciate looking into different cities and how they're doing it. Yeah, so does anybody have questions? Mayor Holman?
Let's see, I don't know if you followed the story in Edmond about
Yeah.
if it's in foreclosure, or not a TIF, but a project, I guess that is.
Yeah.
And I don't know all the details or what all's going on with it, but I don't know, just maybe something to, whatever might have went wrong, if there's anything to learn from it.
Yeah, and
Could be
I
valuable.
definitely want to see their development agreement and see, if they were, I'm assuming they were only paying increment back as it was generated, so that's not, the city hasn't necessarily lost that, lost funding, but they lost that opportunity. so I'm curious to hear from their city attorney and see.
They've
I saw
got
that
a
this week.
campus, they're trying to develop a campus corner
Mhm.
to connect UCO and downtown Edmond. And so, it's in that area, and it's like a mixed-use building. It's not a big giant development. It's
Yeah.
kind of a little thing, but it's just kind of an interesting little like.
I
how'd
got
that happen?
foreclosed on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that one's interesting. I'll look into that.
Could we maybe come back in March oversight and revisit, like give some time to digest? And those of us running, I'm sure will get an earful on the doors about TIFs.
One way or another, probably so.
But I would like to revisit and keep it going through the process, especially as we hone in on a TIF district master plan, which, just out of curiosity, will we be talking about any of those projects we talked about coming out?
I don't think anything's calendared yet, but we've only got a few things scheduled out in January and a little bit in February, so.
I think we probably should do this first and then pick up where we left off with the TIF district master plan.
Yeah.
Just that way, when we get to the point where we're starting to do, like, actually form a statutory review committee and whatnot, we have a process that people will have some kind of input, and we can get our costs covered and have a note for affordable housing and all the things that we would like to see for the city of Norman.
I definitely think there's time, the way things are moving right now, to do that before the other two move forward.
Okay, sounds good. Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'm gonna say